And we are live. Good afternoon from Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My name is Mary Auld-Kovacs, and thank you for joining us here on Let's Talk Real Talk on Ukraine with Dr. Reagan and our podcaster, Andy Martens from the Andy Martens Show. Welcome, Andy. Good to see you again. It's been a while.
Yeah, Mary, it's good. Yeah, we're counting down. In the next couple of months, we'll get back into the gear here.
Yes, we need to get a little bit more serious with Let's Talk Real Talk. Due to many illnesses and deaths in our family, we had to step back a little bit, but that's not an excuse. We've always still been here. And I'd like to welcome back Dr. Reagan for part two on victory for Ukraine. And the only way we can get Ukraine victory is to get Putin out and stop all these wars. Welcome, Dr. Reagan. Thank you
Thank you
for
for
joining
having me
us.
back.
You're
Thank you for having
welcome.
me back. Yeah, actually,
So,
I'm also going to be talking about just peace and versus capitulation, and why we need to have a just peace in Ukraine.
okay, okay. So we'll get you to start off and give us a little bit of an update on what you spoke about on part one. We don't want to go too much into details, but what brought you back to part two today? And I guess Andy and I will ask you a couple questions just to break up the segment. Okay.
Sure.
So
Yeah, in
thank you for
part one, I
coming.
kind of went into the history a little bit. For example, the 300 years of genocide against Ukraine by Russia, ever since the times of Peter and Catherine the Great. And then it continued even through most of Tsarist Russia. In fact, Taras Shevchenko, who is one of the most famous poets, had written so many poems about the oppression of Ukraine by Russia, which almost seems like today, since the invasion. Uh, and then when the Soviet Union, Ukraine had a slight independence from 1917 to 1921, and then Lenin and the Bolsheviks took it over and forced it into the Soviet Union and became the Soviet Socialist Republic of Ukraine. And in the late 1920s and also in majorly in the 1930s, in the Great Purge, and then a little bit in the 1940s, were what we call Holodomors, where there were fake famines that were caused by collective farming and unrealistic quotas that Ukrainian farmers could not reach, and they wound up starving when there was a lot of food. And that was engineered by the end of Lenin's regime, and mainly Stalin. The big one was in the 1930s under Stalin. And then in May 18th, 1944, was the genocide of the Crimean Tatars that were forced out of their homes. And then, of course, in 24, and then, you had in 2004, we had the Orange Revolution, uh, where Yanukovych was elected and not really legally, and Yushchenko was the one that they wanted. So, and he liked the color orange. So, of course, Yushchenko was the one that won that election and won that revolution, and that was bloodless. That was a peaceful one. But in 2014, that's where this war actually started. In 2014, Yanukovych again was the president of Ukraine, and he was pro-Russian. He had promised to allow Ukraine to go into the European Union, and unfortunately, he broke his promise. So then they had a revolution because they didn't want to be part of the Ruski Mir or Russian world, and Heavenly Hundred were the 100 students that were killed by pro-Russian police that was sent by Yanukovych, and also by Russia. And then, of course, that's when Russia invaded the Donbass, which was Donetsk, Luhansk, and Zaporizhia and Kherson, that area. And then, of course, the illegal annexation of Crimea to an illegal referendum where they claimed that people wanted to be part of Russia, but they were asked at gunpoint. So obviously, and that kind of brings us to the invasion that started in February 24th, 2022, and now Ukraine is really fighting the axis of evil because you have North Korea, Iran, and helping, and also China helping Russia. Um, and now, of course, Iran and China are helping with whether it's Shahed drones or Iskander missiles or other, military material. And North Korea is actually helping with soldiers as well as military material. And of course, then you have that whole axis of evil that's fighting against Ukraine, and Ukraine is really doing it on its own, and they've been very, very resilient. So
Hmm.
my focus here is going to be how we have to fight the propaganda, because you're not only fighting the war on the battlefield, but you're fighting the war in cyberspace, on Twitter and on um, all these, on YouTube and on Twitter is probably the worst, but and
X.
many, even on Instagram, etc., that the Russians, and Telegram, for people who have access to Telegram, that the Russians are just bombarding and saying, accusing the Ukrainians of shellings and things that the Russians are doing, and the war crimes. They're accusing Ukraine, and meanwhile they're the ones that are, uh, imposing these war crimes and uh, sending missiles on nursing homes and hospitals and apartment buildings and shopping malls and anything to break the spirit.
Yeah,
You
they're
had a question.
targeting the
I'm sorry.
children and the schools, hospitals.
Yes,
Yes. Did they not just get
it's terrible.
bombing last night after the Trump
Yes,
decided to? He was upset because he wasn't invited to visit the king here in Canada and stuff. So he's revengeful and instigating because he's yelling at
yeah, because
Putin. And
King Charles is in Canada right now. Yeah,
yeah,
it's just
so it's so
it's,
political that it's just so disturbing that people can put things over a country's head because they didn't like not being invited somewhere. Is that
yeah.
right?
Well,
I mean,
as we know, Trump is a child.
yeah,
And I remember, in the words of Michelle Obama, when on his first term, she said, "We need an adult in the White House."
yeah,
Trump is a child. I'm a Republican. I'm a conservative. I am conservative in my views, and I kind of believe more towards like the Republicans in America and France. I kind of go towards that belief, but I don't think Trump is either one. I think he's a populist. He's not a conservative. He only wants to make deals, and he only wants what's good for Trump. I don't believe that he really cares about his citizens, or even his allies. I really don't think
right.
he's concerned about that.
But you could
And
see that
also,
he's gathering other countries to attack Ukraine. This
yeah,
all these cryptocurrencies that they're getting for protection to
exactly.
destroy a country that they think that they all can get a piece of because of the what is it that Ukraine has, the minerals, right?
Yes, the rare earth mineral deal that he
Yeah,
had Zelensky sign.
yeah,
Which I mean, the deal itself will help Ukraine at some point, because it will help rebuild and help investors be attractive to Ukraine. But the
yeah.
problem now is not the time to be doing that.
Well, that's
Right
it.
now, right now, the time is to be giving them arms so that they can beat Russia. They need to be armed to the teeth. We
Yes,
need to send tomahawks so that we can destroy the cursed bridge. Because once if we can destroy that cursed bridge, we can get Crimea back. And I
right.
think that's a real important situation that we need to address in all the countries in America, in France, and all the allied nations. We need to be unified together, and Trump is trying to divide everything. and
Yes,
and I, and also, Ukraine belongs in NATO. They really do, because if they were in NATO, and if they didn't give their nukes away during the Budapest Memorandum in 1994, none of this would have ever happened.
no.
This nothing in 2014 would have never happened, and 2022 would have never happened.
I
and
mean,
and now
Ukraine.
there's a
Sorry.
lot of smoke and mirrors between Lavrov and Soviet and all these Russian people on Russian state TV, turning around and accusing Ukraine of all of war crimes and shelling. I mean, well, it's them doing it. But
Mm-hmm.
when Ukraine actually hits their military targets, and maybe an accident happens and something hits something it shouldn't, oh, then they're doing war crimes. But it's okay for
Them
Russia
to
to do
do
war
it.
crimes for the last 11 years.
Right.
And that's the thing that we really need to focus on. Um, you can't be blaming the Ukrainians and this whole thing with Trump and his tariffs on allies like Canada is completely ridiculous. Canada is like the biggest trading partner between the United States and also in the European Union. He's putting tariffs on, and France is also a very big trading partner and a very big powerhouse right now. France is one of the biggest supporters of and that's my country of origin, and they are the biggest supporters of the background. They are right now the biggest supporter right now in Europe, and it's just incredible. It's just incredible to see that um, that Trump is trying to divide all these different allies and into different kind of different factions so that it weakens the West because we need to be unified. We need to
Right.
be unified. You know, and that's a big problem. And if we're not unified, how are we going to beat Russia? And there's
Exactly.
no way to beat Russia if we're not unified. And recently, Trump changed his tune and he says, "Oh, Putin is crazy." I've been a great friend of his for so long, but he's crazy. Well, didn't you know that all along? You say you're a great friend of his. How could Trump think he's a friend of dictators? He
Exactly.
always seems to gravitate towards dictators, and
Because he
this is
wants to
something
be
that
one. They're
doesn't
more
make sense to me.
powerful.
He
That's what
always
it's power. He wants to be one of the powerful ones as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
president for life. I heard that in the news. I think that's crazy. That's just completely insane.
Well, you could see
It's
what
just
he's doing. If people don't defend him, he goes against them. He'll fire them. He'll have them thrown into El Salvador. I mean, he's like a crying child,
he
that he
is.
doesn't
He's
get
a
his
tyrant.
way. So let me just blow up your building or let me just blow up your
Throw a
country.
temper tantrum.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what it is.
yeah.
And
Trump is a child, and so are most dictators. Trump is
mhm,
a child, and Putin is a child, and so is Xi Jinping in China, and so is the Kim Jong Un, what I
it's
call Rocket
greed and
Boy.
control. Yeah, they
Yeah,
want so much
greed,
control that
power, and control.
they drive themselves crazy.
Yeah, it's all about power and control. And the
Yeah.
only way to have a just peace, and by the way, Zelensky has agreed to everything. He agreed to the mineral deal. He agreed to a 30-day ceasefire. He agreed to everything. And Putin said no. And a just peace means that Ukraine is in NATO and gets their land back. And remember, it's not just about land. These are people's homes. These are people's
Mhm.
livelihoods. These are people's families. Like when you think about Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, which, by the way, the Russians don't even control all of it. They don't even control all of Zaporizhia. The only one they control, I think, all of is Donetsk. They don't control all of Luhansk. They don't control all of Zaporizhia, and they don't control all of Kherson. Some of
Mhm.
Kherson was liberated in 2022, in the end of 2022. I think it was in November. Part of it was liberated. I think it was one side of the river was liberated. So a just peace would be that they get back to that Ukraine gets back to the 1991 borders, and that's what they need to do because that is their land, their people, their livelihood. Uh, I don't know if you know that there is a documentary, and it's called 20 Days in Mariupol, and it would be a very good thing to watch. It shares the horrors of what the Russians did in Mariupol in 2022 when they occupied the entire city. And then, of course, they destroy buildings, they destroy homes, and they genocide the people, and then they rebuild the homes and sell them to Russians. That's genocide. That is a violation of the Geneva Convention. And Putin is a war criminal. He is wanted by The Hague for the abduction of Ukrainian children, and that is genocide. He takes Ukrainian children, brings them to Russia, and or to Russian occupied areas of Ukraine, and re-educates them. And I think her name is Maria Lovabalova. She's the one that works with him. She's also a wanted criminal because she works with Putin. And they take these children and they re-educate them. They Russify them. They make them hate their own country, their own families. They tell them their parents don't want them. I mean, it's disgusting. It
Hmm.
really is disgusting. I mean, this is right out of the Hitler playbook, right out of
Yeah,
the Nazi playbook, and they
it's
turn around
not
and
just
call
not
them
just
Nazis.
Putin. Yeah. It's not just Putin, it's the family courts that are doing it too. So Putin's just copying what the courts are doing because he sees the money, the signs,
Oh yeah, of course, it's
they
all about money.
weaponize the
Yeah,
children, they prostitute them out to, it's
exactly.
just horrific what they do.
Oh,
And you
of
could
course.
see, so
It's just that Putin is a war criminal. I mean, he's the one that's
yes, he's
wanted
a
because
war.
him and
Yeah,
Maria Lovabalova were the ones, kind of the ringleaders. But yes, it's the court system, absolutely. It's also the administrative system, and there are other people, Lavrov, Soviet, well, the whole government, the KG, well, not KGB anymore. Now it's FSB, but still the same thing as far
yeah,
as I'm concerned.
same thing,
Uh,
yeah.
it's just a new name. I mean,
They
and
enable each
then
other.
what was that?
They
Yeah.
enable each other.
They do. And then I heard this other thing. They were saying, "Oh, legally the USSR still exists." Did you hear that one? That was the new thing that Putin and his entourage were saying.
The US.
That we've never really gone. It still exists. It's just so absurd, and
It's unbelievable.
it's just so absurd. And I don't think the West is doing enough. We
No,
really need to arm to the teeth. The one good thing that I can say is that finally, after 3 years of this invasion and 11 years of war, the West finally removed the restrictions on hitting military targets and long range in Russia. Now they can hit anywhere in Russia, which finally is a good thing. But a little late. They should have done this really
long time
11 years
ago.
ago in
Yeah,
2014. They should have done this
yeah.
in 2014. Unfortunately, at that time, Angela Merkel, who was the chancellor of Germany at the time, was too concerned with getting cheap gas from Nord Stream. And there was a lot of that. A lot of countries were doing business with Russia, and they didn't want to upset Russia. They didn't want to escalate. And that's what happened. But remember, Russia is a bully, and the only way to deal with bullies is, in the words of Ronald Reagan, is peace through strength. You
Yeah.
have to. If Ronald Reagan was alive, none of this would have happened. And of course, Trump will turn around and say, "Oh, if I was president during that time, this wouldn't happen. The war would have never taken place."
Yeah.
But what he forgets to tell you is he was president during the war. It wasn't the invasion, but it was the war from the Euromaidan in 2014. So
Hmm.
because he was president from 2017 to 2020, right?
Right. Yeah. He
And
wants to take credit for everything.
yeah, he tries to take credit, but he doesn't realize. Well, I didn't see him doing anything
Well, that's
to
it.
prevent the
Other
invasion,
than golf.
other than golf. Yeah, but yeah, he likes to play golf. That's about it. Let's go have some golf tournaments.
Mhm.
That's it. He doesn't
Sandy,
even.
to weigh in for a second there, Dr. Reagan. Andy, what do you think of all this?
Well, I got to be careful, Mary, because I have to enter the United States next week to see my son. So I have to be very careful what
Yeah,
I
that's
say
pretty
on
sad for
social
us
media.
Canadians. We cannot, enter the United States without fearing our lives either. I got
No,
family across the border. I got family in Hungary. My children are born in Germany. I mean, what do we do? Like I'm first generation Canadian, but really
Yeah,
the American side, the Hungarian side, and the German side is really my family. I was just
Yeah,
born here in this country and I don't have any rights. So,
Well, I
yeah, it's
mean,
hard.
without that aside, I mean, let's face it, Russia has a history of going into other countries. Ukraine is not the first time they've gone in. There's a history with the Baltic states and other countries, and Germany was part of that back then. So this is what Russia does. But I think Trump is seeing that Putin has a problem now. He's not going to give it up, and it's going to have to take some serious stuff to make it given up. As far as Crimea, I think it's a pipe dream to get Crimea back. That's not going to happen. 2014, it was a mistake on Obama's part, but I think it's a pipe dream. Crimea is the done deal. But yeah,
I
I
don't think
think
you can really blame Obama. I think you can blame the collective West.
yeah.
Because when you think about it, I mean, Obama was the only one that actually closed the embassies and at least did something. At least he closed the embassies and he issued sanctions. Everybody else didn't do anything. So I think it was the collective West as a unit that we have to blame. I don't think you can really blame one person.
no.
Because he was the only one that really, did at least he did that. At least he imposed sanctions and closed the embassies. At least he took some action. Angela Merkel was still buying cheap gas from Nord Stream, and so were a lot of the others. And I didn't see any of the other and Francois Hollande. I mean, he didn't do anything from France. I mean, he was another not too bright person that didn't do very much. So I think it was a whole Western problem, not just one person. I just think the collective West just didn't unify because everybody was afraid of Russia. And, that's why I said if Ronald Reagan were alive, this would have never happened, And I think because he would have unified, but again, you can't just blame one person. It was the entire um, Europe didn't do anything. I mean, nobody from Europe did anything, and that's really the closest. They're the closest countries. The only countries that even may have even said anything were the Baltics, because of course they know what it's like to be under communism or when the Soviet Union was around. They know the horrors of it more than
Oh,
anybody, I think. And
sorry, can we stop for a sec? Someone's got something on. Andy,
we've
can
got
you
some. We've
feedback? Can you turn your mic off, Andy? Oh, okay, Dr. Reagan, go ahead.
yeah, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I just think that like recently, you know, the, so it's only like very recently that the West is even doing anything, is even showing any kind of uh, strength towards Russia. And then I hear that Russia turns around and says, "Oh, we can fight for 20 years. We did it with Sweden." Or something like that, the Swedish-Russian war for 20 years. And we've had a war with Finland. And I mean, they've had wars with so many countries. And recently, during this, I would say in the last 30 years, I mean, they had the Chechnya war, which now is the TikTok army that supports them, and you had a war with Georgia. You have the Dream Party, and then you have they infiltrate all the elections. The Russians are constantly infiltrating other elections, and it all. We were very lucky that in Moldova and also in uh, I'm trying to remember what I think it was. It was it Slovakia? I think it was. That they were able to get rid of, not Slovakia. It was I don't know if it was Czech Republic. It was another country that they recently uh, beat the pro-Russian candidate. And so, but there was a lot of infiltration by the Russians. But at least in those two countries, they were able to keep the or vote for the pro-European candidate, which was a good thing. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of turmoil, and again, it's not something that can be blamed on one person. It's just it's the whole West needs to unify. And the other thing, also, the global South supports Russia too. That's another thing. A lot of Africa, they will support Russia because of Russian propaganda. Russian propaganda is so powerful that they use smoke and mirrors, and it's and projection, we call in psychology. Everything that they do to Ukraine, they say Ukraine is doing to them.
That's right.
As I mentioned, the
They play
you
the
know,
victim.
right, the war crimes and all that, and hitting civilian targets and all that. They're the ones doing it, and even in 2014, they did that same propaganda. They would turn
Mhm.
around and when the Donetsk People's Republic was formed, they were partisan groups. They were terrorist groups that were supported by Russia, and they turned around and said that Ukraine was shelling them, and it wasn't Ukraine. It was the Russians. It was a partisan Russian terrorist group. The same thing
Scary.
in Luhansk and the same thing in Donetsk. The
That's
Donetsk
very
People's
scary.
Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic, and that started
Yeah,
right after Maidan.
yeah. And they try to brainwash people to believe in them so that they
Mhm.
take sides, right? And this is how everything gets blown out of proportion worldwide. So, then
Mhm.
they get a country that doesn't want to
Mhm.
support the Ukraine anymore. And, they get convinced that,
Mhm.
we can pay you to help us. And that's the worst part. They bring other
Yeah, and a
people
lot of it is
in.
about money.
Yeah, it's all
Yep,
about money,
and a lot of it
power,
is about money.
control.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of Africans that were forced, they were coerced to come to Ukraine and fight, with big money, and then they wound up getting killed.
Yeah.
And then you had the Wagner Group. You have, with if you remember a few years ago when uh, Evgeny Prigozhin was killed. But you still had the Wagner Group and whatever's left of it in Africa, and you still have a lot of these other partisan groups that work for Russia. So it's
Mhm.
really, really terrible. It's just absolutely
It
terrible,
it is.
and
It
we
is.
don't want history. So we're playing right out of the Nazi playbook right here,
Yes.
and we
They
can't
don't
let
care
this
about the
happen.
soldiers.
No,
They know they
no,
come from a poor country, so they bring them in to become soldiers, thinking that they're going to get,
hmm
paid for it. And all of a sudden they're
right,
getting killed out on the field. And it's
right.
just,
They
they're
don't
just
train
being
them.
used.
And what's really ridiculous is some of the tactics. They leave the turrets on their tanks and they leave all their tanks open, which is very dangerous. A drone can come right in there and blow the whole thing up. Also, another thing that they do is they don't train them properly. They use them as cannon fodder. They're
Well,
just
that's
cannon
it.
fodder. They just go in there and just like they're meat waves. They
Yes.
don't care about their soldiers. They
No,
go and they recruit, as you said, poor people like from Chechnya, from Dagestan, from Siberia, from Vladivostok. You notice they're never from Moscow or St.
no,
Petersburg,
not their own. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Of course
Yeah.
not. It's always from these other like poor areas. And I lived in Russia one time. I went in 2006. I lived there, but that was before all this nonsense happened. But when I was living in Moscow, and I lived in St. Petersburg, and I went to St. Petersburg, and those two areas were very rich, and that's where all the rich people were. But
Mm,
when we took the train from Moscow to St. Petersburg, all the areas in between were very poor, and that's
right.
mostly where these people are coming from. You know,
So you
so
teach
so that's
students,
why
you teach
exactly.
students all this, right?
I'm sorry?
You teach students
What was
all
that?
this all the way from,
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
so,
Well, when I was in Russia, I was teaching at a university in Moscow. I was a visiting faculty member. I was teaching marketing and business and everything. And I also now I teach mostly online globally. I have students from Turkey, I have students from um, India, Ukraine, America, Canada, all over. So
does that affect, let me just ask, does it affect students in any way as Harvard is being, targeted by the Trump regime? Would you, are you compromised in any way by teaching online, or any of your
well,
students?
I wouldn't say I'm compromised. I wouldn't say I'm compromised, but I know it affects my students because, especially the ones that are from Ukraine, because they're, their country being obviously bombarded by Russia. When we like that week that Trump took away the intelligence for that was going on for about a week, and stopped aid at that time. There was enormous enormous shelling, uh, Iskander missiles and all kinds of uh, bombardments and drones from the Russians because they can get away with it. So I think that because of Trump's weakness in trying to and trying to, as he say, trying to come up with a peace agreement because he wants to be the one that's the hero to say that
Right.
he ended the war. But I think he's making it worse because he's capitulating, and you can't capitulate. He's like saying,
Mhm.
basically saying, take whatever you want, Putin.
Yeah.
Russia, take whatever you want. That's not how you deal with it. You have to negotiate from a period of strength, from a
Yeah.
position of strength, and that peace through strength. You cannot negotiate, and he should know that. Being a real estate mogul, he should know that better than anybody. That you
Exactly.
have to negotiate from a period of strength, from a
Yeah.
position of strength, and
Yeah.
that's really the frustrating part. So what we need to do is, we need to make sure, in the collective West, to make sure that the Ukrainian people are protected and that we give them everything they need to defend, not just to defend themselves, but to defeat Russia. Russia
Yeah.
has to be stopped. They have to be defeated. That's the only way to stop these wars. Otherwise, these wars are going to continue. I mean, I don't know if you ever see Jake Bro, but sometimes there's this guy, Jake Bro, who's a big advocate for Ukraine, and
Hmm.
he even said the same thing. He said these wars are never going to stop until Russia is defeated. And now they had this agreement between Russia and Ukraine with the POWs. They're supposed to exchange 1,000 POWs. So
Yeah.
far, they exchanged 309. So I guess they're going to be doing some more.
They
Uh,
released 309.
yes, they released 309, and it was one. And they treat the POWs so terribly, the Russians. First of all, some of them they just kill them even if they don't have a weapon. uh, and they don't even really feed them well, and they treat them horribly. Where Ukraine, on the other hand, they have what's called the "I Want to Live" program, and where Russian soldiers can actually surrender and actually be protected, which is how the Geneva Convention states. You have to be nice. You have to take care of your PO.
Right.
And the Ukrainians actually protect their POWs. They give them 3 meals a day. They can do some work for them. Like the POWs get jobs to do, and to help the army. They also to help the Ukrainian army. They also get internet service. They can call home. I mean, they have they're well protected. So a lot of you Russians, want to be rather be a POW than actually be on the front lines, because at least they know
Right.
that they're protected. Because Ukraine actually goes by the Geneva Convention. But
Right.
on the other hand, the Ukrainians, when they come back as POWs from under Russia, they're thin, they're sickly. I mean,
Traumatized.
yeah, they're traumatized. I mean, they've been tortured. I mean,
Yes.
it's just horrible. It's just horrible.
And
So,
it
they
goes to show the difference between the two countries. One wants peace and the other one wants war. It's quite obvious,
exactly.
that
It's so
Russia
obvious.
is there to kill. They don't care. They want to come in and
Exactly.
take what they want.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's very sad, and we really have to let the world know this. We have to tell the world, look, Russia is the aggressor. And when you have people in Congress in the United States, or in Parliament in a European country, who say not saying that Russia is the aggressor because they're afraid, you can't do that. You have to say Russia is the aggressor. They
Hmm.
are. They started this. They start all these wars, and until they're stopped, and until the Russian Federation is broken up into smaller countries, and these wars are never going to stop. We cannot be afraid of the breakup of the Russian Federation. We need to be aware, and we need to embrace it, not be afraid of it. People say, "Oh, because there's so many nuclear weapons." First of all, no one's going to use nuclear weapons because they know that uh,
Everybody's
that's
gonna get
not
nuked.
winnable. That's
Yeah,
not winnable. Exactly.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
nobody is going to win a nuclear war.
No.
So, if you saw the movie The Day After, you could see that. If you also
Hmm.
heard the song by Nina, 99 Red Balloons, it tells you
Yeah,
in this place there was a city. There's
yeah.
no way you're going to win a nuclear war. It's just
No.
impossible. You'd have total annihilation. We have bombs right now that make Hiroshima and Nagasaki look like nothing. And
Right.
look what happened. Look at the damage in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Look at the damage that happened when they had the Chernobyl nuclear disaster.
My children were affected. My daughter
Right?
died.
Oh, so sorry. Yes.
250,000 moms had to abort their
Yeah.
babies. I was
Yeah.
one of them. And, I was there overseas peacekeeping for Canada. And
Yes. You
here I
went.
got
Yeah. That's
affected.
true.
And now my children are all suffering with cancer, nuclear cancer. I had it. My ex-husband had it.
Yeah.
Millions are still,
Terrible.
children are still
And
born
and you
38
imagine if
years.
you had a nuclear war. And that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It, and it's
Yeah.
never
And
ending.
that was just an accident. Could you
Yes,
imagine if you had a nuclear war?
a war.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it just keeps happening, and it's affected so many people. I mean,
Yeah.
the place
Ukraine's
that you
been
can't even go
through a
near
lot.
it. It's now a museum. I think they just left everything
Nothing
as it
grows
is.
on the
And like
land.
you said, your whole family.
We
Yeah,
were all
it's
affected.
terrible.
And
And
like
your
there
family
were
was affected.
18,000 soldiers a year were coming overseas to do peacekeeping. And they all got, a lot of them, thousands of them were affected, suffering from some kind of illness today
Yeah,
from it. It doesn't
right.
leave the system.
And that's
So,
only a small thing. I mean, that was only an accident. Could you imagine
yes.
a nuclear war? I mean, the
Oh,
whole
God,
world would
no.
be annihilated. It would be over.
It would be
You know.
over in seconds.
Exactly. So
Yeah,
that's not winnable. So people need not to be afraid of the breakup of the Russian Federation. It
right,
will stop these wars, and that's what we need to do. If we want world peace, and we have to help Ukraine. Ukraine is
right.
fighting for our democracy. They are fighting for our freedom. Just like during the French Revolution, we and during the American Revolution, the two countries fought for their freedom. Now, Ukraine is fighting for its freedom. Every country has the right to self determination and to be their own sovereign nation,
That's
and have
right.
their own rights and their own way of living. And Ukraine didn't do anything to provoke this; they just existed, and
Exactly. They've got
that's
something in their land that somebody else wants, but they
yeah.
can't have. That's all it is.
And
It's like
also,
taking a block from another
mhm,
child that's got it because it's in their hand. The other one
mhm,
wants it. Well, just because it's on the land that they got all that minerals, the precious minerals that, they want so
yeah,
bad, why do you need to kill people for it? Why don't you just make deals and,
exactly.
help it,
Make a
help
deal
make a
if you
deal,
want it. Right.
help build the country instead of destroying it to get it. I mean,
Exactly.
there's
Exactly.
so much
But you
blood
know what?
on their
It's not only that's part of it, but there's other
part of it.
reasons, and that's only
Right.
part of it. Russia
That's
wants
only
to expand their empire. That's number one. They want it. They want their 1914 borders. They want to expand their empire back to 1914 borders. They want, and they took over these countries, by force. They also are very jealous of Ukrainians because Ukrainians live better than they do for the most part, with the exception of the two cities, Moscow and St. Petersburg. The rest of Russia doesn't live very well, and they. I mean, think about it. They would steal toilets. I mean, during, like, when the invasion first started, they were stealing toilets. They were stealing kids' toys. They were stealing appliances. And they were stealing sneakers. I mean, it was just crazy. Uh, so a lot of it is also jealousy, which is,
Mm-hmm.
if I can't have it, neither can you. It's that attitude. So that's
Well,
part of it. So part of it is to get their empire back. The other part of it is because jealousy, because Ukrainians have what they want. They couldn't have it. Not just a mineral deal, but even just everyday life.
right.
They have better standard of living, and
Mm-hmm.
so and that's another thing. So a lot of it is jealousy. And then they started raping women and raping kids and even raping babushas, grandmothers. And it was just terrible. This is what Russia does. And Russia talks about family values. They don't know what family. They have no family values.
They have
And
none.
and they accuse the Ukrainians of squashing religious freedom. Ukraine always has religious freedom. They just don't want the Russian Orthodox Church to perpetrate their propaganda on their people and Russify them. That's what they don't want. Because remember, the Moscow the Russian Orthodox Church is not just a religious organization. That is a government organization that is trying to work to expand the empire,
Mm-hmm.
and realize that, and that is the problem. And I hope that what I'm saying, along with many other advocates for Ukraine, I hope that this word gets out, and that people understand uh, that. Uh, we need that. Of course, Putin needs to go. I mean, we know that he needs to go, and then we need to break up the Russian Federation in order to stop these wars.
Right.
And I have a nonprofit that that me and uh, my my co-business person. Actually, he founded it, and he's the founder and president. His name is Orlando, and it's called the Great Leap Forward. And we want to be able to help people with mental challenges globally. And one of the areas that we want to help is Ukraine. Other areas
Right.
is of course Latin America and other countries, but we also want to help. Help. Part of it is also to help Ukraine because they are dealing very badly with a lot of mental challenges because of this war. And
Mm-hmm.
the idea of losing parents and losing loved ones and losing your whole life, losing your homes and homelessness and just war trauma in general. You know,
Right. Right. Yeah.
so
Too many chiefs want no, like it's just right
yeah,
now it's Ukraine is wow. We need to support them, the Ukraine, and get those weapons that they need because they're you know
exactly.
they're
We need
trying
to
to block
arm them to the
countries
teeth.
from giving it to them, right? So that they
Yes,
have
yes,
no hope in hell to fight. So
exactly.
let's hope that this doesn't happen with Canada, because I can't see Canada not wanting to support them because they're sending our troops over to help. And my son is one of them. He's in the Royal Canadian Navy, and he was already shipped out to Ukraine
Oh,
uh
really?
2 years,
Wow,
2 years
wow,
ago. Yeah.
oh,
So,
wow,
and he was affected by the Chernobyl, and there he
oh,
is, still,
wow.
keeping on, being strong for the
Yeah.
country.
Oh,
And
definitely. Yeah.
yeah, so
Well,
all I
well,
can say
Canada is
is
a strong. Canada is a very strong country, and that's why the maple leaf is their symbol. Because the maple tree and the maple leaf is a sound of strength. Just
yes,
remember
I've
that.
got a whole bunch planted
Very
in my
strong.
yard. And I tell you, they're the
Yes,
strongest trees I've seen. And they pop up
absolutely.
out of nowhere. Just like,
Oh yeah, and Canada is a beautiful. I've been to Canada many times, and I love it. I've been
yeah.
there many,
One
many
sec,
times.
I just got a knock on my door, but give me a second here. But hold on.
Uh-huh.
Sorry. Oh, okay. Give me a second. Okay, sorry about that. I just got to take this.
Oh, no worries.
Hold on.
No worries.
Thank you. Okay, sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. I just like to end with this really interesting quote, and this kind of just sums up, this whole thing about peace to strength, and being strong, and supporting Ukraine in every way. Golda Meir once said, "Never negotiate with someone who's out to kill you," and Russia is out to kill Ukraine. So so that means that Ukraine should never negotiate with Russia.
Never.
And
Wow.
and I just wanted to leave everyone with that, just that that the Ukrainians, and we need to keep them strong.
Yes. Yes, we need to have faith and pray daily and peace to Ukraine.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Reagan. Thank you so much for coming out and speaking out on Ukraine and the power to all the people there. They have good faith in, each other. They are strong people, very strong people to go through what they've been going through. And, our
They are.
children don't need to
Oh,
go
yes.
and be shooting another child there. This is just so disturbing what this has come to over, decades of abuse. And we pray for the people and the children and all the families out there, and let's pray that the war ends, and
Yeah.
the
The
the world
Ukrainians have
needs peace.
been going through this for 300 years.
Yeah,
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 they've been going through this for 300 years, and
it's a
I have a
long
lot of
time.
connections there, and I always try to help them as much as I can. But thank you again for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining us on
I
Let's
really,
Talk,
really appreciate
Real Talk.
you having me, and thank you for letting me get this started.
You're welcome. Just give me a second and I'll end the show with thanking everybody out there. And if they want to reach out to Dr. Reagan, you could contact her here on Let's Talk Real Talk. We'll put her email address up in the comment box. And let's just, support Dr. Reagan and all the work she's doing for Ukraine. Thanks again, and good night, everyone.